Can you please explain how you met Tony?
Yes, well, first of all, let me tell you my name. My name is John, and I come from Scotland. I met Tony in prison. I was a prisoner, and I read Tony's book, Taming the Tiger. I was so impressed with this book because I saw a reflection of myself in his book. I was a bodyguard. I committed crimes. I was staying in prison for 3 years. And at that time, 3 major things were happening in my life. One, my mother, who was a Christian, she was really praying for my salvation. My mother also, she was the one who sent me Tony's book. And when I read it, I was so compelled to change my life that along with going to the Bible study in prison, Tony's book really helped me to understand how you can have a real relationship with God. So I thank God and thank Jesus that he used Tony and he used the prison to show me how I could change my life. I was a very violent man before. I said I worked as a bodyguard. I worked with many famous people also. I worked with the Rolling Stones for a short time, but this was never enough excitement for me. I needed more. And I worked with a group of highly professional soldiers. And from time to time we would receive a phone call from gangsters and mafia guys with a similar problem that Tony had. Can you go and collect some debt? Somebody owes me some money. You know, I never knew the Bible in those times. I wasn't interested in religion. But I knew one thing. I knew if you live by the sword, then you die by the sword. And this was my attitude. This was my attitude for the men that I went to visit. And I went to visit them not with a nice smile on my face. I went to visit them with a mask and with a shotgun. And there was 4 of us, and we would break into their homes and maybe kidnap them or take them hostages. And you know, we used to beat them. And I treated people like animals. And I'm ashamed.
Как вот это изменение произошло? Только прочитали книгу и все? Вы на самостоятельно?
How the change took place? You just read the book and that changed you?
Oh no. You know, Tony's book can't change you. Tony's book can inspire you through the Word of God to maybe make the changes, but only God can change you. But Tony's book really helped me, because it began to make me see that maybe my life was worth something. And even though I was in prison, and I was violent, and I'd done many of the things that Tony had done, I could see that God could take Tony, who, forgive me Tony, was worse than I was, and change him, and make him a better man. So this gave me hope for myself. But the greatest hope I received was reading the Bible. When I read all the wonderful things Jesus done, and how he loved sinners, how he welcomed them. For me, that gave me some hope, some light. And also, at that same time, God made these events in my life that I joined the Christian fellowship in prison. And the pastor there, he really helped me to understand that you can have a relationship with God. He was the one who also told me that there were some things I must do if I want to be a Christian.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So that last sentence again, bro.
Say again?
So that last sentence
Yeah.
again.
Как вы встретились с Тони? Как вот произошла встреча?
How did you meet Tony? How you met Tony?
Well, I was involved with the Bible study group now. I read Tony's book, and I really hoped one day I could meet this man. I really wanted to say to Tony, thank you, because you really helped me to know God more. And I almost prayed, I think, I would love to meet this guy one day. Or maybe I would write to him or email him once I got released from prison. But the amazing thing was this. A few months later, I got moved to a new prison. And while I was there, I was telling people about taming the tiger. A few weeks later, the prison put posters on the wall, and they announced that there was a man coming to the prison to speak to the prisoners. He was a former world kung fu champion, and his name was Tony Anthony. And I was amazed. Because I tell you, never before in my life did I ever pick up a book and read a book and think, this is great. I would like to meet the author. And then the author came to visit me. It never happened. But God made it happen. And Tony came to the prison and he spoke to about 200 men that day. And he said the same things as you've heard today. And I was very impressed. And I went to speak to Tony afterwards. I introduced myself. And I'd written a poem that I was inspired to write from God. And I said to Tony, I wrote this poem for you. And I read your book, and I just want to thank you for your book. It was really helped me in my understanding of God, that maybe my life has some value and that God can still love me even though I did many bad things. And Tony told me in that meeting, he said, John, one day you and I, we're going to work together. And he gave me his card and he said, stay in touch when you get out of prison. Well, a few years later, about 2 years later, I was released from prison, and I didn't stay in touch with Tony because, you know, I was caught up again in the world. I needed to find somewhere to live and find a job, and how am I going to support myself? And almost I forgot God. You know, I took God from the center of my life at that time, and I pushed him to the outside for 4 months. I was struggling, and nothing was working. I couldn't find anything. But when I brought God back into the center again, my life improved in so many ways. And I joined a great church. I trained there to be a leader in the church. And now I felt I have something valuable to say to Tony. And I emailed him. I said, I hope you remember me. But I didn't think he would, because Tony speaks to maybe 3 million people every year. And I was just one prisoner. But I emailed Tony and I said, I wonder if you remember me. You met me in jail a few years ago. And he wrote back. He said, yes, I remember you. You're the guy who wrote the poem. I was amazed. He remembered me. And we continued some dialogue. And then eventually he invited me to London to a conference where he trains people in evangelism. And in this meeting, at the end of the meeting, Tony said to me, would you be interested in joining my organization? He said, I have 176 evangelists all over the world. And my organization, Avanti, now trains and equips and helps evangelists to go out and spread the word of God. Would you be interested? I said, of course. You know, instantly I made my decision. And you know, this very same week I had a job offer to go to Moscow to become a teacher of English and open a big business there with a lot of money and an apartment. And I refused. And I chose to go with Tony and do God's work. Because for me, the greater glory in this world is not money or the nice apartment, but to go and share the gospel. And look how God changed my life. I was in prison. I was violent. I was involved in kidnappings and shotguns. And he totally changed my life. He transformed me. And here I am today with TV cameras, speaking to your viewers and you, and going into prisons and schools and universities and anywhere we can to share the gospel. This is how God changed a man like me and a man like Tony. I thank God every day. Every day I wake up, I thank God.
Спасибо. Thank you.